Hey, thanks for watching. This video is basically me telling a story back from 2013. I thought I'd try something different today, just thinking back on things I've learnt over the time investigating. So in 2013 would have been when I was still known as Otherworld Investigations, and I was partnered up with Pennine Paranormal Society, which is led by Cy Booth, who you might have seen operating with us. At those times I used to record the investigations on a dictaphone and then dictate them along with my thoughts into notebooks like this. And then that would be the basis of the write-ups that I typed up for the investigation. We didn't really record. We did sometimes use video actually, but they were like for personal remembrances. So yeah, we used to record them that way. I want to tell you about this case from 2013. It all started when Cy came to me with an investigation and said, would I like to go to this lady's house, just the two of us, to do a pre-investigation, just do a little conversation with her. Because we didn't want to drag the whole team out on a case that we could solve in 10 minutes talking to the person. So effectively, we went round the lady's house. This lady was about, I'm going to say 70. She was retired and she lived in a home where she said there was a poltergeist. Now immediately, that sounds great. That's a big claim. Not so great for her, of course, but I was happy to go along and just see what she had to say for herself. The claims which Cy then told me she'd reported were things like multiple damage done to her property in the fact of scrapings and faces appearing around her house in the woodwork, in the paintwork. And at this, I raised a quizzical eyebrow of, what do you mean? They weren't there and then there were faces in the wall. So immediately my brain is saying, just like marks that she's interpreting as faces. Anyway, Cy continues. He told me that there were markings on her wardrobe, there were scratches along a hallway wall, cracks in like a wooden side piece in a kitchen, almost like a skirting board but vertical. There was a face in a brick in the back of her fireplace. There was other markings on her table. There was markings on a drawer for her cutlery. There were scratches on her taps in the bathroom. And the list just went on but made me go, what? But hey, not for me to really jump in, but I'd kind of thought, I think I know how this is going to transpire. So we met up with this lady, and she walked us around the house, and I think she took us upstairs first, showed us her wardrobe, you know, a lovely Narnia kind of double-fronted wardrobe, and then opened one of the doors and showed me, at maybe waist height, I would say, a groove in the wood. And she's like, look at this damage, this one here before. And it just looked like wear and tear. It was definitely marked about an inch. And all I did was open both doors, look at her clothes hanging there, and saw this thick coat with huge buttons at the exact height. And I'm thinking to myself, I've had a similar situation myself, catching things in the door when you cram everything in the wardrobe. But mine are more modern and would be chipped sort of plastic coated things, whereas hers was proper wood. Now this woman, I must say, had lived there all her life. It had been her family's home before it. They'd given it to her. She's now 70, so the family, you know, had lived there a long time. So God knows how long that particular wardrobe had opened and worn on those exact buttons. You know, for how long had it been there doing that? She led us somewhere else. She led us along the hallway, I think, and in a certain light, you could see maybe bad painting or bad plastering had been painted over. And if you stood at a certain angle, you could see the change in texture or colour. And she said, well, that's appeared. It had no signs to me that it would suddenly appear. It was just she'd noticed it. That's my gut feeling. Now, Si is very good. He's always very open to listening to people. I was the one to be kind of the one to say, no, I'd just say it. That was my opinion, and that was my strong gut instinct. And this is kind of why I'm telling this story, to show what I learnt about myself. And it was a good learning curve for me. We went into the bathroom, and she says, look, these taps, they have scratches all over. Where they used to be shiny, they've picked all the scratched all the shininess off the very ends. I went really close on these taps, and I scraped my finger along the dull parts, which protruded because it was limescale build-up. I picked that limescale off, and it was completely shiny then. And I showed her, I said, look, it's limescale, it's just build up. You can clean this off. It's not a removal of the silver, it's an addition to the silver. She didn't really take that very well, because then she could exactly see my agenda was to shoot down all her claims. And that is pretty much what I did. We went down to the kitchen. She said there's a face in this piece of wood. She'd paid a painter last week to paint over the whole thing. I got really close and I could see a knot in the wood, which again, I'm thinking, okay, I'm only seeing the knot, but generally speaking, it's things like that that make you say it looks like an eye or a mouth or something like that. So I was like, yeah, it's nothing. It's nothing. And Si was sort of steadying the waters between me and the client. She pulls out the cutlery drawer, and along the top of the brown wood, again really old-fashioned, it had all rounded. It was no longer its crisp, brand new wood. It had all opening and closing, and around the handles where you're grabbing the handles and letting them fall back, the swingy handles, sat like that. It's bashed. It's just overused. And I'm having to say again, yeah, but that is your most used cupboard in this kitchen. Why is it surprising that is not in mint condition after 30, 40, 50, 60 years? It's not surprising. And she's saying, well, no, it never used to be like that a few weeks ago. I mean, that is wrong. That's just wrong. Why would a spirit come in with a sander, sand it all down, and if it was sanded down recently, it'd look shiny. You could tell it was done recently. This was old. Even though it was rounded, it was old rounded. No signs of new scuffs on it. And then to the fireplace, she had us bend down, look into the fireplace at a brick that was now half a brick. This missing half a brick had obviously, over time, recent times, broke away and fallen down, revealing what she interpreted as a face when she was sat looking into the fire. She saw what I was up to. She tells me 40 years ago she did a supernatural course. She knows what I mean when I'm saying matrixing and pareidolia, and that is not what's going on here. Si jumps in, not calms her down, she wasn't angry, but she was, like, hey, I know what you mean. Si smoothed things over. I bit my lip, to be fair, and our line of questioning changed from what she was presenting us with anything else that may have happened. We ended up hitting on something, talking about, have you ever heard sounds, weird, noises? And she said, yes, bangs from the attic. Now, I'm thinking to myself, well, yeah, that actually is a thing. Spirits don't sit in your living room with you. They tend to reside in the places you go the least. That's why cellars and attics are generally their resting spot when they're not on the other side completely, because they come and go. So yeah, I gave her that. I said, that does sound interesting, trying to calm her down myself. And she tells me that she's had the house blessed 20 times to the cost of £200 to a local holy man who would just keep coming back for a tenner a pop and blessing her house. Si and I both were pretty disgusted that a holy man would take £200 off this woman who was obviously living alone and, noticeably a little bit, what we'd call in England, batty. Not like mentally unstable, but, batty. But looking for an investigation, I thought, well, what if there's some correct elements of this story? We have to come and try. So, although me and Si were outside at the end and I'm saying, what's she on about? I did still say, but we have to come back and give it a go. So that's what we did. So it was middle of June-ish in 2013 that there was Si, myself, Jill, who's in my team at the moment, and Kevin, who used to basically do the cameras and stuff like that. We walked in with quite minimal equipment, thinking, we'll just bring the board in, some torches, a couple of meters, just do it like low-key. I went round with the Gauss meter K2s to check for EMF because, high EMF, living in a high EMF zone can make you hallucinate, make you feel dizzy, and alter your brain in a way that makes you feel ill. However, this was the flattest EMF house I'd ever come across. There was like the TV when you were really close, a kettle if you turned it on. She didn't have Wi-Fi, this woman was not in the digital age. And so it was really good. If we were going to get a hit, that was going to be significant. So we got the dining room, about to do protection. We've got a torch on the side. The torch comes on, sat on its own. The Gauss starts to click. We're all on airplane mode. It's like, well, I know this house is flat. This happens quite often around protection. The energies pick up and it seems to be detected. Anyway, we link hands, I say the protection. It just continues to rise. And Si says, okay, make it go from 1, up to 2. And on command, it starts to click and click and click and before it suddenly drops again. A few of us asked out, probably me and Si, and then it wasn't until we changed tack and said, Jill, you ask out, let's try a female. As soon as Jill asked out, it responded. The first spirit to the board tells us that there's 3 male spirits in this house, and it starts saying 5, 4, 5, 4, 5, 4. Were you 54? No. We get it down to the year 1954. Meaningless as of yet. I'm asking, did you do damage to this house? And it did say yes. So I'm like, that's weird. It did say yes. Why did you do damage to this house? Rolling with it. Because it's angry, basically. What are you angry about? It spells out hut. H-U-T. And we're like, what hut? Hut out in the garden? Yes. I asked the client, did you have a hut in the garden? Oh, yes, yeah. There used to be 2 huts in the garden, because my father bought the neighbours off him as well. Okay. She says they were torn down a good while ago. So the team's sort of saying, okay, Spirit, you angry at the demolished hut? And the Gauss just has a big hit on it. Turns out this spirit said he'd built the hut in 1954. The client says, well, I've lived here all my life, and so she says, I was about 6 years old when that hut was there. And when my father bought next door's garden, he apparently used one of the huts as a chicken coop. The spirit said that he was too old to look after the hut, so he was fine with selling it to the neighbour. The client remembered when she was that young, she did have recollections of an elderly couple living next door, but she was only young herself. But she's like, yeah, I do actually remember an old couple living next door. Kind of ties in, right? After a while of not getting a name and us talking backwards and forwards to the spirit, he declared himself to be called Charles. Brilliant, nice, we're getting somewhere. Nice to meet you, Charles. Sorry about your hut. And then the client tells us that it's been a family home for ages. She's not had children to pass it on to, and she's basically selling up before it's too late. She wants to enjoy the money. Therefore, there's been some work in the garden area, and there will be some work inside the house, modernising it to sell. And it seems like the work in the garden has stirred up a neighbour's spirit. Ever since this hut gets knocked down, the spirit has come into the house. So Charles tells us that he was obsessed with his garden. He moved next door 1943, and eventually, not too long after, sold his bit of gardening stuff, his hut, and his space in his garden. We talk about coming to a compromise. We say to Charles, if the client puts a potted plant or a flower in your memory, will that calm you down? And he spelt out geranium. The client says, sure, I'll get a geranium in your name. Now I know your name, Charles. I mean no quarrel with you. So that's what she planned to do. And the investigation pretty much closed there. Everything seemed settled. But of course, there were still the other two spirits that had been identified. We walked away thinking, okay, we don't know about the damage, but it seemed that the neighbour had come into the house for whatever reason, and maybe she'd picked up on him, I don't know. But there's more to this story. If you want more videos like this where we talk about old cases, then let me know in the comments. I love your feedback. I like making videos, and I'd just be nice if I can do more of these, but if not, I'll do something else. The usual, leave a like, subscribe. Any interaction is really appreciated, guys. So to pick that story up, that first investigation, Charles had actually finally spelt sorry on the board, which closed off, a lovely investigation. 2 days later, our client is back in touch with Si. I'm thinking, we're going to get everything's alright now. But no, things had gotten worse, supposedly, because what had happened, the client had been in the house alone, and a strip light underneath a cupboard had just suddenly smashed. It wasn't even on, shattered. Scared her to death, really. So with all, us going and using a Ouija board, she was on edge. We're telling her there's a spirit in her house. She's like, why are things exploding? I want you back. So, yeah, sure, we came back. But this time, Jill couldn't make it. Sue, our other team member, came with us, and we thought, let's go and throw as much equipment at it as we can. So I'm placing dictaphones upstairs. We've got a laptop running a camera in the other room that we're not in, and the kitchen. And in those days, I was still sort of listening to people say, I saw an orb near the kitchen, and the kitchen's where the face was, and, now I wouldn't really give it the time of day, but for what it's worth, we saw some dust. Back again in the client's dining room, and this time immediately the Gauss was just so much higher. I knew this was a flat area, and yet I could hardly find a quiet place for it to be. What's all that about, you know? Energies were obviously higher. So the client says to me, I think this spirit, this other spirit is a foreigner. Why do you think it's a foreigner? Oh, because of the face in the paintwork, what's appeared. Thinking about the priest who had been and ripped her off, she mentions that 3 vehicles had died in her driveway. What she actually meant was the gardener who had come and done the ripping down of the hut and stuff. He'd parked up fine in the driveway. Upon trying to leave, the car had died, just would not start. So he had to get AA to come out and sort him out. Meanwhile, the last time the vicar came, his car wouldn't start. Couldn't drive away, had to, call the AA. And when the vicar got home, parked up next to his wife's car wouldn't start either. That's kind of interesting. 3, 2 is a coincidence, but 3's a pattern, as I say. As we're hearing these stories, the Gauss shoots up stupidly high for 6 minutes. That was, I don't know why that was, but it seemed like, okay, something strong is here and wanting to make itself known. Now, Charles was supposedly happy. He had his flowers, as she said she would. She was good to her word. So it's one of the other 2. The next time we get a spirit on the board, on the first session of day 2, if you like, Harold is spelt out. Harold is mad, he says. I am mad. Mad about what? The neighbour, he spells out. This turns out to be the client's dead dad. Fuming over the mess, that has caused all this. Saying, what's he mad for? I bought that land off him fair and square. He comes round here in my house, and it was just like that. He was mad that his daughter felt she had to sell up at all. He wanted her to keep hold of it, but she had no family to sell it onto. So really she was doing right, but her dad was like, no, you should keep it, for whatever reason. Harold, the dad, also said that all the damage done was just wear and tear. Completely agreed with me. Said the next door neighbour said it was him. Just nonsense, he just tried to wind you up. He did none of it. And he said, your mother has even been in, and she says it's just wear and tear, but she was not like a residing spirit. She's popped in, she visited, she goes, but they were in agreement apparently. With the mention of the mother, the client reveals, well, yeah, actually, my mum did kill herself in this room. Why didn't you mention that before? Kind of vibe. The energy on the Gauss changes to fierce, like there's a microwave walking around the room at the mention of the mother. And it seems like, there's some strong energies, but at least we know they're on the client's side. Our client goes on to mention, in fact, 3 of my family members have died in this house in various rooms. This woman, really. But anyway, we knuckle down with Ouija board communication, and we find out that the 3rd spirit is getting bossed around by Harold. He reveals himself to be from Egypt, at which point the client looks at me and is like, told you, a foreigner. And I'm like, you did? You did say that? Now, I'm finding out this information on my own terms, viewing it through evidence, not hearsay. And I ended up having to say, you know what? I thought you were misleading yourself, and I have to eat my words. So that was a big lesson learnt for me, going into a case and thinking it's just nonsense, she's just a bit dippy, old. And then sort of saying, no, she might have gone around it the wrong way, but she was correct in her thoughts. Now this third spirit, this foreigner from Egypt, he says he did smash the light. He also says he created the face in the kitchen. I'm not really buying that. Sai asks the spirit, what did you think of the holy man who came then? And the spirit says infidel, which is a specific form of insult. We say, what faith are you? And the spirit says, Islam. And then he finally says his name is Fakir, which is Fakhir. And he says he's been here for 14 years, laying dormant, attached to an object, a haunted object that has come back from Egypt when the client had bought it from over there. 10 months ago is when he started making himself known, because Charles and Harold had started fighting, if you will, around the house. Harold had started bossing the neighbour's spirit, Charles, around the house. 10 months ago was when Fakir sees this energy increase between the spirits and pipes up, says, I'll have a bit of that. All the upheaval, the client says, started 10 months ago, because that was when the work on the house started. That was when the garden started being renovated, the house started being renovated. So it all kind of ties in, a rise in activity, a knocking down of things and a rearranging of the house. But this third spirit, this haunted object, just wanted to get energised off the activity going on and made himself known. So now we knew he was attached to an object, but there were many Egyptian cat ornaments around the house, and obviously he wouldn't tell us which one. Sai starts to say, well, what if we brought round an imam? I think that's how it's pronounced. Basically a holy man to do with Islam, who would not look favourably on this spirit. Sai says, if we brought round an imam, he would think you were a jinn, a demon, if you will. And Fakir starts spelling no, because I say, yeah, because don't they put jinns in bottles? You trap them in a bottle and you can put them in a Dybbuk box, or you can bury them under running water. All these are the supposed ways to capture and hold a bad spirit in the Islam mythos. So feeling threatened, the Egyptian spirit says green man. Green man had always come up at different investigations as Sai's nickname for when spirits wanted to be crossed over. It's like he had the energy that could move cross the spirit over to the other side. So he was basically asking for help instead. And so even though we were only dabbling in such matters and didn't really know what we were doing, we always managed to get through it. And so that's exactly what we did. We asked him if he could see this light, asked the spirit if he could see this light, a doorway opening up, and he would say things like, oh, it's my wife. And we were like, well, what's your wife doing? Holding out her hand. Well, we'd say, take her hand, she's leading you from here to the other side. And so Fakir took his wife's hand and seemingly closed the door from this side, and everything fell silent. The Gauss was silent, the glass wouldn't move. It was just pin drop silence. Are you there? Who's there? Fakir, are you there? 2 minutes maybe later, the glass moves. How many spirits are here? 1. It's the father. So it seemed like that was fair enough for the dad to be there. The client's happy with Harold being there. Harold's happy. And Charles seemed to have gone or quietened down one way or the other because of his plant. And that was just an interesting case. But a case where I had to learn, hear things out. Don't just jump to the conclusion of you know exactly how it is. I still do that with some things, but I like to think that was a turning point from 2013 that I took on board with listening to people and hearing them out rather than just making up my side of the opinion. So I hope you got something out of that if you're still watching to the end, and maybe we'll talk about another one someday. Comment in the comment section. Thank you. See you later.